Thanks everybody for attending today. My name is Brian Fitzgerald. I'm from Kumba Jazz. I'll be back in a little bit for the break, but I would like now to introduce the Monterey Bay Economic Partnerships President and CEO, Kate Roberts. Take it away, Kate.
Thanks, Brian. So appreciate you and so happy to be able to support our local musicians with this venue like we always try to do. And you and Kumbwa, we love you guys, and thanks so much for sharing your talent.
We miss you, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. We'll see you in a bit.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in to MBEP's 6th Annual Regional Economic Summit. I hope everyone is doing well and hanging in there. This is day 51 of staying in place for my husband and me, and we still love each other. Isn't that right, honey?
Yes, sweetie.
I'm coming to you today from our beautiful home in Santa Cruz, and we feel very blessed to be able to shelter in a comfortable home with plenty of food. In fact, the trash guy is coming by right now, so you get the full home experience. I'm sad that we can't be all together in person, but I'm grateful that we are still able to come together, albeit virtually, for today's event. I think we're all craving engagement and staying connected, and we've certainly had lots of opportunities to experience these in new ways over the last month or so. A couple of things I've noted. I love having a peek into everyone's homes and seeing some zany Zoom backgrounds. It's also been interesting to see our communities engaging civically with a wider demographic, and virtual city council meetings, planning commission meetings, and the like, enabling more folks to participate in our civic processes. And when I do venture out for food or for meds, it's been amazing to see our roads so empty, which has meant that pollution levels are lower than ever, and we're saving all sorts of time not driving around in our cars, and are instead able to spend lots of time with our loved ones. So from our home to your home, I hope you'll bear with us as we embark on this experiment to move to a virtual conference where we can engage with you safely while still bringing you the same compelling content you've become used to with our conferences. On that note, I wanted to give a special shout out to Doug Erickson and the entire team at Santa Cruz Works, who helped us think through the logistics of a virtual conference and who has been a great partner to MBEP. So thank you, Doug. So while you're getting settled in, I wanted to offer a few housekeeping points. Please use the Q&A box. We want this to be as interactive as possible, given that it's virtual. And there below on your screen, you'll see some questions. In fact, there are already some comics already sending some questions in that asking where the avocado breakfast bar is and when do the mimosas get served. So the Q&A is working. We encourage you to do that now, even while the speakers are talking. We'll also have a few polls happening throughout the event, so keep an eye out for that. And in about an hour and a half or so, we'll have a short break so you can stretch your legs, get some tea, and just have a little break. So I think we should do our first poll just to give you the hang of it. So you'll see that pop up below on your screen. And the question is this your first virtual conference? Yes or no? Pretty straightforward, right? And the votes are coming in. You can see that building. So we're kind of split. It's interesting. Got some people that have done it and others that this is your first time. So like I said, I hope you bear with us and we'll get through this together. I also want to recognize the many elected officials that are joining us today from across the region. Thank you all for your leadership, especially during this crazy time that we're in. It's been amazing to see so many of our jurisdictional leaders step up and lead. I'd also like to give a shout out to our student participants. As you may recall, we always like to give pro bono tickets to students in the region, and we have about 40 students who are joining us today from all over the region, including some high school students for the first time. So hi to all our students and thanks for joining. And of course, we have to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors are who make these events possible. I'm so grateful, and a real heartfelt shout out, especially to our platinum sponsors, Our Family Properties, Dignity Health, Southwell Ventures, and San Benito Health Foundation. All of our sponsors stuck with us when we embarked on this switching from in-person to a virtual meeting, and I just can't express our gratitude enough. Our gold sponsors, Kaiser Permanente, Santa Cruz County Bank, Driscoll's, City of Gonzales, Chevron, UC Santa Cruz, Palo Alto Medical Foundation here in Santa Cruz, CSU Monterey Bay, and Monterey Bay Community Power. Thank you all our gold sponsors and our silver sponsors, Stanford's Children's Health, Montage Health, Bay Federal, and the City of Santa Cruz. And of course, our media sponsors, we love you at KAZU, which is based out of CSUMB, Monterey County Weekly, and Santa Cruz Tech Beat. Hey, Sarah. And of course, our amazing board of directors whose leadership during this crisis has been so valuable, not just to MBEP, but to the whole region. Thank you so much for all you amazing people do. Oh, my bad. And of course, our members, we just cannot do our work without you. You're the ones that literally keep the lights on at MBEP, and we're so grateful for your support. Of course, at this time, your support is more important than ever. So if anyone out there is thinking about joining or would like more information about joining MBEP, we'd love to have you as a member. And of course, we always are accepting donations as a 501c3. So if you would like to donate as an individual, we would love to have that too. And that's really easily done through our website. We have a big donate button. So of course, I saved the last, but certainly not least, my awesome team, Team MBEP. I'm truly blessed to have such a passionate and talented team who work tirelessly to make our region stronger. I miss seeing all of you in person, and I really miss Ms. Roxy, who is our little mascot that we have in our Santa Cruz office, and I miss her too. So thanks you all for all the great work you do. So I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about what MBEP is doing in the context of the COVID-19 crisis before we get to our first speaker. But first and foremost, I want to be really clear that COVID-19 is a health crisis and humanitarian challenge. Our discussions today as to the economic health and outlook pale in comparison to the loss of life and the human tragedy brought on by this pandemic. So first, let's have a look at how our members have stepped up in amazing ways. Here are just a few examples, and I'm sorry I would go on for an hour of all the amazing things that our members have done. But in particular, Santa Cruz Works, their Ride Out the Wave program has helped hundreds of local businesses in Santa Cruz County. There's been tremendous efforts by our local banking institutions to process the PPP loans, defer payments, et cetera. Special shout out to Santa Cruz County Bank who processed MBEP's PP loan. Of course, Second Harvest Food Bank, who's been instrumental in keeping our region from going hungry. And Monterey Bay Community Power, who is providing an across-the-board discount for all customers of their rates of 50%, 50, for May and June. Boom, that's just awesome. But of course, our healthcare community is at the heart of this pandemic, and we owe them so much love and gratitude for all they are doing to go above and beyond during these extraordinary times, putting their own lives at risk so that we can stay safe and healthy. Of course, our community foundations continue to provide a lot of help for our neighbors who are struggling. MBEP worked with all three of our community foundations to recently launch a campaign called Community Cares. The goal is to encourage residents who may not need all of their federal stimulus checks to donate what they can to one of the three local COVID-19 relief funds to benefit those who need it most. Funds from the Federal CARES Act are already arriving in our bank accounts and mailboxes. We can help ensure that no one in our region goes hungry, loses their housing, or goes without help that they need. And the need is big. Our neighbors are hurting from sudden job loss, salary reductions, and new responsibilities. So please consider donating to your local community foundation's COVID-19 Relief Fund. Real quick, I'm gonna give an overview on a few things that MBEP has been up to specific to the COVID-19 crisis. We published our housing emergency response paper and are now hosting weekly coordination calls with housing leaders from throughout the region to help track and implement the 9 housing emergency response recommendations that you see here. We have created an ongoing venue for local government staff, business leaders, and nonprofit service providers to find more alignment on the highest impact housing initiatives in our region. Based on the feedback from this working group, we've established a subcommittee on rental assistance to identify the best ways to stabilize housing for essential workers during including our large undocumented workforce. We will be providing additional recommendations and are helping to build partnerships on this urgent topic. Our unmet housing production needs are even more clear now, so we continue to support more housing at all income levels, and aligned with the shelter-in-place orders that allow our local governments to continue to issue building permits for certain developments, we are working to ensure that housing development projects in each of our 3 counties continue to move forward through the planning and construction phases. Finally, just prior to the pandemic, we made a significant investment of over $4 million through our Monterey Bay Housing Trust to bridge housing to acquire the Paloma del Mar senior apartments in Freedom. These affordable rental homes for seniors on fixed incomes were in jeopardy of converting to market rate housing if Bridge Housing did not acquire them and commit to maintaining affordable rents. No current tenants of the 130 units, all seniors, will be displaced as a result of this purchase. Thanks to South Swell Ventures, City of Watsonville, whose funds made this loan possible, and of course to our Housing Trust Silicon Valley, who's our partner in the Monterey Bay Housing Trust, who matches every dollar we raise here 4-to-1. In broadband, MBEP has been working with the Central Coast Broadband Consortium for several years to attain improved broadband infrastructure. We've improved the data mapping of regional coverage and are providing support to local ISPs to access infrastructure grants from the state. This will allow currently unserved areas to tap into a $300 million California Advanced Services Fund to subsidize the build out of ISPs in the region. And specifically, now when the digital divide is so glaringly obvious, we've been focused on some immediate solutions to get communities connected. MBEP's COVID-19 response broadband paper outlines a clear set of recommendations that can be implemented in our region to bridge the digital divide, with special focus assisting jurisdictions and education leaders to expand device and internet connections for students. In workforce development, our free online tools are more important than ever as we adjust to the new reality of virtual meetings and outreach. Our Monterey Bay Career Connect is free online resources for college and career planning. We've buffed out our educator resources portion of that to help educators during this time. We have the Monterey Bay Career Coach, where we have live job postings and labor market data. And of course, we have our Monterey Bay Internships portal, where we've put a special focus on remote internships, and we've added more tools and information to our employer toolkit so that they have more information to be able to implement remote internships during this time. We're also hosting employer workshops online. You can find more information about that on our website. And we're in the process of creating more video tutorials to help people access these tools and maximize the use. And of course, we're on social a lot, so you can always find out a whole bunch of information through LinkedIn, through Facebook, and through other social media platforms about what MBEP's doing in workforce and our other initiatives. So on the local level, I wanted to just share a little bit of information that's coming in around economic data specific to our region. Normally, I would take a few minutes to recap the progress we've made on our regional dashboard metrics, where we track 11 key indicators on our regional well-being. But as we sit here today, we felt that reflecting back on data from last year just wasn't relevant as we wrestle with this current, very dynamic economic situation and navigate these uncharted waters. So today, I'll just share a few data points on our local situation and then turn it over to the real economist. Some unemployment forecasts claim that we've hit record highs in unemployment. This was some recently published data from Monterey County that came out of the University of Pacific and their business school. It shows, crazy amount of unemployment happening next month in May, almost 20%. And in May alone, they're projecting over 40,000 unemployed. Just one data point, Chris will give us the real story, I'm sure. And in Santa Cruz, the story is much the same. About a little over 27,000 are forecast by this source to be unemployed in the month of May. And of course, as we all know, it's affecting our large industries that we have here in the region: restaurants, tourism, retail, sales-related industries. So many of our workers here are really considered that category of vulnerable. Clearly, this pandemic has been devastating to our tourism industry. This is just one couple of data points here specific to Monterey County. Of course, many of our region cities and counties, the drastic elimination of transient occupancy taxes, or TOT, and sales taxes from their coffers that would normally generate from tourism dollars will have a crippling effect on their ability to keep core operations and services going. We are doing the right thing now and focusing on those most vulnerable in our communities to be sure their basic needs are met. But once we move beyond this phase, how do we create a way to funnel and coordinate efforts on a local economic recovery? So this really brings us to the question, what has the current situation with COVID-19 revealed about the gaps in ensuring economic prosperity for all in our region? Underlying all of MBEP's work is the urgency we feel to capitalize on this moment. We must double down on our efforts to address the issues facing our region. We must recommit ourselves to providing real economic equity. And we must create new processes and governance models that work for all our residents. As a triple bottom line organization, MBEP looks at all three aspects of our society: economic, environmental, and equity. As we've seen through this pandemic, it is disproportionately hurting poor communities and low-income minority workers. Bruce Katz, who spoke at last year's Regional Economic Summit, is a respected thought leader who we need to be listening to even more now. In a recent article, he offered a recipe to address the racial and ethnic inequalities that created our broken safety net, and he gives specific solutions that focus on building regional networks that professionalize and make permanent the public-private civic responses to this crisis and to the continued aftermath of stresses. This is why MBEP exists and what we do every day. As we move through the stages of this crisis, from relief to recovery and onward to renaissance and resiliency, we are thinking a lot about MBEP's role in this transformational and economically inclusive rebuild. As one example, MBEP is partnering with California Forward and local community-based nonprofits as part of California Forward's Regions Rise Together initiative that shifts regional economic paradigms and builds on inclusive economy, which is equitable, just, and sustainable. Our work together this year will culminate in announcements that will occur in December at the California Economic Summit, which for the first time is coming to our region. The summit's bipartisan network of business, equity, environmental, and civic organizations is unique in championing solutions that meet the triple bottom line, simultaneously growing the economy, improving environmental quality, and increasing opportunity for all. Please save the dates. And while I'm plugging events, please don't forget that our big fall event, MBEP State of the Region, will be the day prior on December 2nd. This is the day before the California Economic Summit, so we look forward to kicking off what is already shaping up to be 3 extraordinary days. Now I'd like to bring in Chris Thornburg, founder of Beacon Economics, who, as many of you know, has spoken at several of our past conferences. Under his leadership, his firm has become one of the most respected research organizations in California, serving public and private sector clients across the United States. An expert in economic and revenue forecasting, regional economics, economic policy, and labor and real estate markets, he became nationally known for forecasting the subprime mortgage crash that began in 2007 and was one of the few economists on record to predict the global economic recession that followed. Just yesterday, Beacon published a new paper entitled The Post-COVID-19 Economy, A Case for the V, which I am really looking forward to learning more about as Chris shares his insights into what lies in store for our state and our region. Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate. I appreciate it. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Wow. Certainly has been an interesting few weeks, to say the least. I would note that, of course, as of last year, we saw no reason to call the end of this particular expansion. But given this morning's GDP numbers, it's pretty clear that the expansion has truly come to the end. And this COVID-19 recession is truly underway. These are unprecedented times, and I won't go through all the metrics. We understand globally millions of people inflicted with this. Here inside the United States, thousands and thousands of people have passed away. We're well over 1 million cases. But the big question isn't about the economic situation right now. We understand that this is truly unprecedented. And the numbers in terms of, say, the negative 5% GDP in the first quarter, the number of claims for unemployment are truly startling. This expansion has come to an end. But with that in mind, the question is, how long will the pain last in this system? And I apologize for the background noise if you can hear that. I happen to, believe it or not, be in an airport. But the question, of course, on everybody's mind is, what next? Where does this thing go? How long does it last in the system? In other words, it boils down to that quintessential economic debate. What letter is it? Now, there's lots of letters out there. The people are talking about W's, and some real pessimists are talking about L's. But the real debate is between what I would call the V crowd and the U crowd. The U crowd, of course, the folks who think that the pain happening right now is something that's going to last for a very long time. Some of the basic numbers I've seen out there suggest we're not going to get back to Q4 levels of economic output until the end of next year. Unemployment will be elevated for multiple years. Now, to be clear, it's really hard to come up with any kind of forecast right now. In fact, all forecasters need to approach the current situation with a high degree of humility, because in too many ways, this is truly unprecedented in modern times. Now, what that means, of course, is there's an enormous amount of uncertainty out there, and clearly things can go a lot of different directions. Now, what bothers me about a lot of these folks claiming there's a U is that they don't have a lot of evidence for saying that out loud. Yes, we have some numbers for the first quarter of the year, but remember, most of the economy was indeed operating in the first quarter of the year. It was only the last couple of weeks of the quarter where we saw the pain really start to creep into the system. Coming into the second quarter, we know there's going to be a historic downturn. But again, the question is how long will it last? Well, the key to understanding this is also to understand that the metrics we've seen so far that are scaring a lot of these economists are not metrics that we can examine with a traditional lens. Take, for example, initial claims for unemployment insurance. Right now, those number of claims are approaching 30 million. To put that in context, in the entire year of 2008, the first year of the Great Recession, we only saw about 22 million initial claims for unemployment actually pulled. In other words, these numbers are truly off the charts. And all by itself, if you look at that number, you'd say, wow, this is scary. Clearly, this is going to be worse than what happened back then. But in fact, what happened back then and what's happening right now are completely different. Back then, the Great Recession was driven by the collapse of the subprime bubble that had pumped $15 trillion of money into the household sector and the finance sector, money that had almost no credit standards attached to it. That highly inflated parts of the economy, consumer spending, consumer borrowing, and of course, let's not remember the housing market, which is overbuilt and overpriced like we've never seen before. When everything started to unwind, ultimately, the parts of the economy that were overheated by all that credit collapsed in on themselves, kind of like the remnants of a volcano collapsing into the caldera after, of course, the eruption had ended. That meant millions of jobs were lost and lost permanently inside the United States. That's a really bad circumstance to deal with because millions of people had to go out and find new jobs, find new careers, new ways to make money. Things, of course, that take a long time to do. Hence, while it was the worst downturn since the Great Depression, it's also worth noting the economy didn't fully heal from that shock until about 2015. So yes, it was a bad cycle. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that the employment numbers we saw, initial claims for unemployment, for example, believe it or not, those are lagging indicators of economic harm. The peak of initial claims for unemployment occurred in June of 2009. Now, why do I bring that number up? Let's contrast what's going on right now. In fact, we have very few numbers except for unemployment claims, which of course have already hit a peak and are starting to go down. In other words, these are not the same sort of indicators of a large negative shock hitting the system. These indicators reflect little more than the public health mandates that have been put into place to control this virus. And that, of course, is a big deal. We have to keep something in mind here. When it comes to these kind of conversations, the damage to our system, for example, the damage that created that long-run harm, this isn't represented by people being laid off right now. Let's do a little thought experiment for just a second. Imagine that a few days, a week after, 2 weeks after the public health mandates have been put into place, some genius scientists had come up with a cure for the virus. I think we can all agree that people would have very quickly all gone back to work, and there would have been almost no harm to our economy, except for the fact that we had a couple weeks where we couldn't go out and eat. In other words, the numbers you're seeing today are just reflection of public health mandates, and they will only last as long as public health mandates. As soon as the mandates go away, these jobs come back. This is not, if you will, a traditional recession-causing exercise. Now, the key here is to understand that while businesses are shut down, while people are unable to work, they're not earning money. That's the long run damage. That's the damage that will hurt our ability to bounce back in the second half of the year when we get in front of this virus. Now, how much damage will that create in our economy? No one really knows. And that's why it's dangerous to leap to assumptions about this being a very long-term negative downturn in the US economy. We just don't know. But if you want to think about it, let's say this. If you really want to think about how much harm will come out, how much harm is going to be created as a result of these shutdowns, you have to answer 5 basic questions. The first question is, how deep are these shutdowns? Number 2 is, how long will they be? Number 3, how healthy was the economy in the first place? Number 4, what's the government doing in the meantime? And last but not least, will people substantially change their behavior post-virus? Once you answer these questions, then you have a good sense of whether this is going to be a U or a V. In our eyes, this mainly lines up to be a V, and let me go through my reasoning why. First of all, how deep? Well, we know, of course, that tourism, travel, things that are important to the Monterey Bay region have been completely shut down. However, as much as that's hurting the local economy, overall travel and tourism really aren't a big part of the overall U.S. economy. And indeed, if you look at the first quarter numbers, believe it or not, while that part of the economy certainly created some hit to overall growth, it wasn't the big part of it. In fact, the big part of the slowdown in growth in the first quarter of this year is something that is both good and bad news. It was mainly healthcare, declines in spending on healthcare. And that's because, of course, in the midst of getting ready for the pandemic, a lot of hospitals, a lot of doctors either shut down completely or basically canceled all discretionary procedures. People simply stayed away from the healthcare system because everybody was expecting a mad rush of people to be there with the COVID virus who needed desperate help. Well, guess what? Outside of places like Seattle and, of course, New York City, those surges of people never actually showed up. So we didn't get the positive spending driven by the negative ramifications of this virus. That's actually relatively good news. So how deep is this actual downturn? Perhaps not as deep as we might think. Our guess is only 10 to 15% of the economy is actually being shuttered right now. Now that number gets bigger as time goes on because of supply chain effects, which brings me to my second question. How long? Well, yet again, we seem to have some sense that we are, in fact, getting closer to the light at the end of the tunnel. Look, the number of new cases is falling. And if we look at China or Italy and Spain, we understand this overall is about a 3-month hit to production, about a 4-month hit to overall consumer spending. That at least comes out of the micro data coming from China on a week-to-week basis. What that all ends up saying to us is more or less the second quarter is the center of everything. By the third quarter, most of the mandates should be lifted and things will be getting back to normal. Now, I'm not saying the virus is going to be completely eradicated. Of course it won't. But we're going to have teams of highly trained health professionals running around, tracking down any new cases and isolating those individuals so it doesn't get out of control the way it did this time. Remember, it got so bad this time largely because we weren't expecting it. Remember, this was an exercise in ignorance. Even as we were running around telling ourselves everything was fine in February, the first deaths were already occurring. You only get one Pearl Harbor. We're much smarter now. And of course, we're going to be able to keep this thing really at a minimum over the course of the next couple of months. So look for Q3 to be when the economy really gets up and running again. So not that long, not that deep. The second two things, how about the economy? Well, it turns out, and this has been something I've been saying when I've had an opportunity to join Kate up there in the Monterey Bay area, is that believe it or not, despite all the negative opinions, this economy is about as healthy fundamentally as it's been in 30 years. We came into this mess with saving rates at a 30-year high, with debt to income ratios near a record low level, at debt burdens near, again, a record low level, and not just for high income households, for all households. People are steady and sturdy. Our labor markets, actually over the last 2 years in the US, we've had more job openings than people looking for work. This is not a fragile economy. In fact, labor shortages have been one of the big problems we've been suffering from. So this is an economy that could take a hit and still move forward. Number 4, what's the government doing? Well, yet again, the news is relatively good. The answer is probably more than they need to. You're talking over $2.5 trillion of stimulus. To put that in context, In a typical quarter, there's about $5.5 trillion worth of transactions going on in the US economy. $2.5 trillion of stimulus in the context of a $5.5 trillion economy. Wow, that is an unbelievable fiscal stimulus plan. And one, of course, that's going to go a long ways towards minimizing some of the damage being done right now. And a lot of that money, remember where it's going. It's direct checks to households, direct support to businesses. Of course, we have a major expansion in the unemployment programs, all things that are going to help people get from here to there. In terms of credit, same sort of thing. A lot of panic about the credit markets, but why? In fact, if you look at bank delinquencies and commercial loans, they were at a record low level before this began. Housing markets have been in incredibly solid form with very, very clean mortgage markets and a lot of equity. This is not a fragile U.S. economy, combined with, again, $2.5 trillion in stimulus. Those four factors all by themselves, again, say V. Last but not least, will people change their behavior? And this is a bit of an unknown. After all, we're talking more about psychology than necessarily economics. But if people really are afraid to travel, they're afraid to go out and eat, well, that means, again, this pain's going to last deeply into the second half of the year. Well, I'm not a psychologist, but I can tell you I have a bit of history here. This is not a new normal. In fact, this is a return, an unfortunate return to an old normal. We have to remember, pandemics have always been with humanity. It's just in the last 30 or 40 years where we've gotten, if you will, a little bit too secure in the midst of our very, very steady, solid public health systems. Well, this time around, they weren't there to protect us as well as they wish they could have. But again, it's still a situation by which we've seen this play out before, whether it's polio or smallpox or the mumps. You can go through diphtheria, yellow fever, typhoid. All these pandemics used to regularly hit cities across the globe. And guess what? Between the pandemics, people didn't disappear. They went out, they socialized, they enjoyed themselves. People are not that psychologically fragile. And history yet again shows us that when things get better, people go out and they live their lives. So you add up the 5 questions: how deep, how long, how healthy, how much help, and do people change? The answer to all these is V, not U. No doubt, Q2 is going to be the worst quarter for growth we've ever seen in the United States, again, because of these public health mandates. But look for Q3 to be the best quarter for growth as we come roaring back when the mandates go away. Some people are getting hurt, but those hurt folks are being helped quite a bit by, of course, all the government efforts going into place right now. On the other side of it, for those families, and there are lots of those who aren't being hurt, there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of savings built up to fuel that pent-up demand when we come out of this pandemic situation. Ultimately, first half of this year, end of the expansion, we get that. This will be a recession. But what it's going to be known as is an incredibly sharp, incredibly short recession. 2 quarters before we get back up and running. And our prediction is by the end of the year, we'll be back largely to where we were at the start of the year. Now, I realize this sounds a lot different than what you've been hearing out there. After all, it's hard to not see anything except for these incredibly negative headlines of massive economic downturns lasting in the system within years. But I would point out to everybody that let's all remember that hysteria is the new normal when it comes to these kind of conversations. You know, in January of 2019, we saw the stock markets down 20% because 75% of economists who contribute to the Wall Street Journal Next Recession Survey said we were going to have a recession the next year to a year and a half, driven by the collapse in real estate, a Chinese trade war that was going to demolish U.S. manufacturing, and of course, inflation was creeping in, which was driving interest rates up. They were all sure it was the end of the expansion. Now, of course, none of those things actually came true. And it just, again, reflects an incredible need for everybody to come up with the most dismal headlines ever. Hysteria, not reality. That's the new normal when it comes to these kind of conversations. There's no doubt this is the biggest hit to the U.S. economy in 10 years. One, of course, that, yes, has truly ended what otherwise has been a record-long expansion. But this is not a great recession type scenario. Millions of people lost their job and they had no idea what they were going to do next. And it took years for many of them to land on their feet. This time around, the vast majority of these people who are unemployed know exactly what they're going to be doing in a few weeks, which is doing what they were doing a few weeks ago. So hold tight, listen to your public health professionals. The cure is not worse than the disease. We will get through this as long as we get this thing under control. And of course, next time around, we're going to be a little smarter and a little wiser about this entire situation. We've learned a lot. We've learned that these things can happen and we need to pay attention to it. We learned, of course, that we need to pull together and work with each other when times are tough, because that's how you get through it relatively quickly. What is going to be the true long-run effect here? Are there any big negatives I'm worried about? Threefold. Retail was under a lot of stress, of course, because of the internet. And you're going to see some retail shops simply not reopening. Now, again, that's simply rushing a problem that was already going to occur. There will be some issues there. Same with restaurants. Restaurants are going to get hit, not so much because they lost a couple months of business, but because we had too many restaurants. It was an industry that was oversupplied and really struggling. So I expect those two sectors will see some losses. But again, as a percent of GDP, they're not that much. And for those folks who have been released from those sectors, they can take heart in remembering that prior to this short, sharp downturn, we had the tightest labor markets in 50 years. The other place I'm worried is government. Look, particularly here in California, a lot of local governments have already been close to the bone. Things are tough, of course, because of pensions, because of rising costs, and the fact that business taxes just haven't been rising as rapidly as expenses have for a lot of businesses. They're going to take a giant hit in the short run here. And of course, let's all remember, because of the loss in equity values, they're all going to see a huge increase in their contributions for those pensions over the course of the next few months. That's going to be a tough road to hoe. So yeah, we have a fiscal problem, something to pay attention to. That will be an issue. The other thing, the federal budget. We're going to end up borrowing $3 to $3.5 trillion this year at the federal level. And while I appreciate a lot of that money is necessary to help us bounce back quickly from this, let's all remember a lot of that has to do with the fact that our federal government is already running a massive deficit of $1 trillion, which running $1 trillion deficit in the 10th year of an expansion in an otherwise healthy economy, well, that's just bad planning. That's bad governance. We have a situation where we're rushing headlong towards a massive federal fiscal crisis. And this year, where we're borrowing more than we did during World War II, is bringing that crisis that much closer. So pay attention. The long run still matters. The long run matters for you in terms of the planning for your businesses and the choices you make. The long run is important for MBEP and the work they do in continuing to promote economic growth in the Monterey Bay region. And the long run is important for our government as well. So take heart, be careful, get through this, and we're going to have a much better second half of the year. Thank you very much, Kate. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you and see if, and we'll continue to move forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. That was really informative and comforting. I knew you would have a sane perspective to share. There are so many questions coming in that we're just not going to have time to get to, unfortunately, because we're a little bit over time. But I think that was really worth it to hear your perspective on both the short-term and the long-term situation. I'm just going to ask two quick questions. First of all, people are confused when you talk about U's and V's and, the V economy versus the U and the L. Can you just really quick?
Absolutely. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the U-shaped scenario is a big negative in Q2 and almost very little growth until the fourth quarter of the year. So we stay down in the third quarter. Yeah, you got it. And then eventually, or the Nike swoosh is another way they like to call it, right? But it's that low, long, painful climb back up to normal levels of output. In contrast, the V, which is what we expect, is a huge downturn in the second quarter, followed by a huge upturn in the third quarter. Look, when the mandates go away, the vast majority of shuttered businesses are going to come back online, and they're going to start buying products, and we're going to start getting the economy up and running again. Not everything's going to heal overnight, but it's going to happen much quicker than anybody expects.
Great. And just one question, I'll put you on the spot here. If there were one thing that we could be doing today, something that we might look back in 4, 5, 6 months and say, if only we had, what would that be?
My personal druthers is the craziness of this PPP program. Look, Helping people who are unemployed, yes, you want to get those businesses and those people who are truly displaced. But we're sending $1,200 to everybody. There's no point in that. Some of those folks meet it, but a lot more don't. Equivalently, this PPP program, huge amounts of money going out in loans, but there's no controls. We're not trying to drive it to the companies that actually need it. So my problem here is not that they're not doing enough, it's that how they're doing it, they are very well likely missing people who need that help, businesses that need that help. They needed to be smarter about how they disperse this funding.
Great. Okay, well, I think we're going to have to move on. We could do this for many, many more minutes, but I appreciate everyone's time. We want to keep on schedule, and I'm so grateful, Chris, given your busy schedule, you were able to join us.
My pleasure, Kate. And keep up the good work up there.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. So before we get to our next speaker, I want to do another poll. After hearing Chris's talk, are you feeling now more optimistic, less optimistic, or neither? You just feel like it's good to have a reality check? And those are coming in, generally trending more optimistic. I'm feeling the same way, I have to say. Good, so those will continue to come in. It's nice to see, and that'll continue to build there. Okay, so, and then we're gonna do one more quick poll. Great, I can see that. So it's kind of split actually between more optimistic and just, it's good to have a reality check. Good, and not too many of you out there are feeling less optimistic. I'd like to see that. Okay, so one more poll real quick. This is a warm up for our next speaker. Funds generated by the census are used to support which of the following? Local hospitals, public schools, infrastructure projects, dislocated workforce assistance, Medicaid, Head Start, or all of the above? Okay, you know, it's a trick question, right? That is just to make sure that everyone understands the importance of the census and our next topic that we're going to cover. We had originally planned to have this on our agenda before the COVID crisis, but I think it's still really relevant as we understand what funds come into our region and how important a complete count is. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Vince Baraba, who's a member of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission and has twice served as the director of the U.S. Bureau of the Census. The only person to have been appointed into that position by 2 U.S. presidents of different political parties. He has been appointed to government positions in total by 5 different presidents. He retired in 2003 as the general manager of corporate strategy and knowledge development at the General Motors Corporation, where he played a critical role in the development of OnStar technology. And currently he serves on the community board of the Palo Alto Medical Foundation in Santa Cruz, which is how we found him. Thanks, Larry. So not surprisingly, he has received numerous honors and awards. And I just have to say, it's been a real honor to get to know him during this process. We are thrilled to have him here with us today. Vince, over to you.
Thank you, Kate. Well, Kate has asked me to discuss the importance of the census. Now, our country has been counting our entire population for some time and using the census of inhabitants for a very long time. Its primary purpose is, of course, the allocation of congressional seats to states, but it has also been used for other purposes also for a very long time. This letter from the Postmaster General, written in 1793, serves as an example. He said, if there be any spare copies of the census of inhabitants of the states in the office of the Secretary of State, who then was in charge of taking the census, the Postmaster General requests Mr. Jefferson to favor him with one, it being proper to attend to the population of the country in forming an opinion upon application for new post roads. General Post Office, December 26, 1793. So in addition to allocating seats in Congress, we even used the census to figure out where to put our post offices. Now my history with the Census Bureau goes back quite a bit, being both a user and a pusher. I was a user from 64 to 72, using the census information while working in political campaigns in California and throughout the United States. I became a pusher in 1973 to 76 and 80 to 81 as director of the Census Bureau. I became a user again in using census information in developing business strategies for very large corporations. And in the last decade, I was still a user while serving as a commissioner of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission. So let's start with an important function to which the census is used and is directly related to how you are represented by elected officials. We'll do this in a way by discussing the manner in which the California election districts were drawn by the Citizens Redistricting Commission in 2011 using the 2010 census. Now, there was a rather long list of requirements that we had to follow, but I want to focus on just one, which is the concept of communities of interest. And let me provide an example of the importance of addressing the concept. Soon after our commission was appointed, we began our visits throughout the state. Our second visit was in Marysville in Northern California. This was one of our first meetings, and we did not have a lot of time to reach out to the different population groups in the area. During the meeting, we asked if there were any interest groups that are not in attendance but should be considered. A participant commented that the Sikh community was not in attendance, but that their interests should be considered. Not having any idea of how large this community was, we asked if anyone had an estimate of the size of the community. Another participant got up and said there were about 10,000 Sikhs in the area, and they played a very important role in the farming community through their efforts and success in bringing rice farming into the area. In addition, they annually host the largest parade in the area. Another participant got up and said we should also hear from the Hmong community because of their contribution to farming as well. This picture of the 2016 Sikh parade reinforces the citizens' comments about the magnitude of the parade. The purpose of this week-long event is the celebration of the culture and religion of Sikhs, primarily from the Punjab region of India, but who come from all parts of the world to attend this annual celebration in Northern California. And the community of interest comments from our commission resulted in a creation of this assembly district. And you notice that it has both a Sikh community collapsed in the southern part and the Hmong community connected in the northern part. Now, what do these three districts have in common? Well, it's pretty clear they have Monterey Bay. And this is an example of a community of interest that's a little bit closer to home. But let's take a closer look at Senate District 17 and see if we did as good a job of considering communities of interest by focusing on Monterey Bay. Do you see any area outside of District 17 that should have been included within the district? Well, how about California State University at Monterey Bay, with many of its students living in the district, and the university was within a few miles of Monterey Bay, was somehow left out of this district. Why? Because we had to create a compliant District 12. Remember, all this was going on when we were creating all the other districts in our state. In addition to creating districts, in the county of Monterey County was not undercounted by 8,000, at least 8,000. It would have allowed the commission to consider creating District 12 without including California State University, Monterey Bay, and leaving it in District 17. In addition to creating districts with common interests, there's also the issue of losing federal and state funds based on an undercount. In this case, $166 million, which might be considered somewhat understated. Now, although the self-response to the census, to the 2020 census forms that were sent out is not a definite indication of future undercount. It can serve as an indicator to where you should plan on allocating to ensure that resources to ensure that everyone is counted. For example, although the non-response rate as this last Monday in the cities of Santa Cruz and Monterey was 60%, which is higher than the state of California at 54 on Monday. The cities of King City, Greenfield, and Salinas were in the low 40%. Now, one of the reasons we have low undercount in some of those areas is that these members of the Hispanic community, in some cases, are very concerned that the information that is collected might be used against them. And I just want to let you know that under Title 13, not only your personal information, but even the address lists used in the census are confidential. In the litigation that followed the 1980 census, the city of New York obtained a New York District Court order requiring the Census Bureau to turn over its address registers for the city so that local officials might compare their the listings with their own records. Because of the lawsuit, we were under a court order not to deliver those results to the president at the time requested under the Constitution. Thanks to Justice Thurgood Marshall, I received a phone call late the evening of December 31st, indicating that the justice had stayed that ruling, and the next morning, the Secretary of Commerce and I forwarded the census results to the president. In 1982, the case ultimately reached the U.S. Supreme Court, which decided in the Census Bureau's favor. Address lists could not be disclosed, either through civil discovery or through the Freedom of Information Act. The Census Bureau has provided 2 partner specialists to work with you, and I assume they are listening to this presentation and will be available to you on request. So to reiterate, communities of interest must not only be counted, they must also be heard. And so I would suggest that to this group that we should coordinate with the new 2020 Redistricting Commission to arrange for a redistricting commission hearing in our area, much like the one that we held in Marysville. And then to create a group earlier to create the 3 legislative districts that have those maps available to share with the commission, who will likely consider them when finalizing their plans. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Vince. Very interesting, and it's such a pleasure to have you join us today. There's a couple questions just trickling in now, but I'm going to start with one because, of course, in the context of the COVID-19 situation, can you talk a little bit about the timing of the census process, how that's being impacted and adjusted due to the health crisis?
Well, when it was announced that they were delaying it, several of us former directors got together and we communicated with the census officials to make sure that this was not a political event, but a real necessary event. And upon that conversation, it became clear to us that the Census Bureau had done a very thorough job of investigating the complications of conducting the census during this terrible event. And they have, I think, made the right judgment in delaying it for about 3 months, which will cause a lot of problems later on, but nothing like the problems that would have occurred if they had conducted the census on the day's schedule.
Yeah, great. One other question that's just come in is another area we feel is undercounted in our county is our unsheltered homeless population. How can we do a better job counting that population?
Well, this is in contact with the census specialists that were assigned to this area. There is a program that the Census Bureau has and how to address that issue. And given the outreach programs that are currently in place by citizens of this area, I think the combination of bringing those people together would be a good way of addressing those issues.
Great. Okay, good. Well, we're going to move on with our program. Thank you so much, Vince, for participating. And
thank you for having me.
Okay.
And make sure you're counted.
Make sure you're counted. I've already sent mine in.
All right. Bye.
Thanks. Okay, so by the way, while we're getting ready for our next speaker to join us, all these slides, my slides, Vince's slides, everyone's will be available on our website, like we always do with our event website that we posted. This whole conference is being recorded. So if you missed parts of it, or if somebody you want to share it with, that will be posted hopefully by the end of this week. So keep an eye out for that. Okay. We are going to move on to our next speaker, who is a fabulous local guy, Tom Brose. He's a farmer and he leads a farm working team at Live Earth Farm. He also runs the largest community supported agriculture or CSA program in the region. Live Earth Farm's overall farming philosophy is to grow crops as closely and harmoniously with nature as possible. As you might imagine, Tom is passionate about the health of the environment and his community. In addition to running Live Earth Farm, he founded Farm Discovery, an educational nonprofit, and has supported Food What, two fabulous local organizations that are focused on connecting kids to their environment and empowering youth through food. So please join me in welcoming Tom Brose to our virtual stage. And Tom, you're looking kind of crooked there.
Am I here? Yeah. Okay. Hi, Kate. Thank you, Kate, for your kind introduction. And thank you to everyone who has worked so hard to make this virtual forum possible. You know, these are unpredictable and trying times, and through the lens of a farmer, I see COVID-19 really like an outbreak, a little bit like an outbreak of a pest or disease on a crop of ours, where we need to quickly decide what tools to use that are at our disposal, to minimize short or long-term damage to the farm. As an organic grower, my first line of defense is typically focused, on prevention by relying on the natural health and resilience of the farm. And I only use very sparingly more costly or direct interventions, which could upset the balance of any existing natural controls. So I believe that the more we understand the supporting relationships of the natural ecosystem we live in, I think the healthier and more sustainable our future as a community will be. I guess farmers are generally optimists by nature. A fellow friend of mine, Dinesh Willie, a Madera County farmer, I think captured it well when she said, and I quote, to believe that every time we plant a seed, that it will germinate, that it will outcompete weeds and pests and diseases, to bloom, to set fruit, to be harvested and sold at a fair price, takes a great leap of faith. And, Kate, when you said to talk about our local food ecology, this is a very broad subject. So I just like to narrow it down and use these few minutes to reflect on our experience of directly marketing to consumers as an opportunity to build a stronger and more resilient local food system. Small to medium-sized organic farms like ours only represent a small fraction of local agricultural operations here. However, our direct access and interaction with consumers may offer a perspective how such closer relationships could translate into healthier eating choices and favoring more ecological farming practices and supporting food businesses that are more diverse, more nimble, and maybe more interconnected with the local food economy. Just a little background on the farm. We started farming 25 years ago together with my wife, Constance, and our then 1-year-old son, David. And we founded Live Earth Farm here in the beautiful Pajaro Valley near Watsonville. What inspired me was the then still very nascent organic farming movement and a very little known and unorthodox marketing strategy called Community Supported Agriculture, or CSA for short. And what is unique about CSAs is that producers and consumers enter into a very mutually supportive relationship where the farmer will commit to grow and supply weekly portions of the farm's harvest, in exchange for an upfront financial commitment that typically lasts for an entire growing season or more. The CSA is at the heart of our farm's operation and has allowed us to evolve into what is today a small but diversified 60-acre direct market operation. We're growing more than 50 different crops and sell them through farmers markets to restaurants directly, retail stores, and we distribute almost 600 custom packed produce boxes to a community of CSA members. Now, this was pre-COVID-19, just a few months ago. And over the last 6 weeks, a lot has changed. This whole social distancing and shelter-in-place requirements had an effect that we now have doubled our CSA membership. And we are at a point today where we are asking people to place themselves on a waiting list, something that is really unheard of in the history of our operation. And we're not alone in this. The same demand is happening to CSA programs here locally, but also all over the state and the entire country. And similar demand is being experienced at farmers markets and online home delivery services who directly source from local producers. You may say, well, the sudden increase may, not last very long once this crisis subsides. But I think it's pointing to something more important. It shows that people trust this direct and more transparent relationship, and it is an increasingly important part of their purchasing experience. Customers are increasingly interested and place a premium on knowing where and how and who has grown the food they consume. And CSA members and farmers market customers every week pepper us with questions on crop varieties and how to cook with them. They ask us about our growing practices, how we control our pests and diseases, and whether we cover crop or use conservation practices. They want to know how we treat our employees and our food safety practices. So there's a constant interaction and I think an engagement with our customers. And it has been our farm's mission ever since we started to give people access to the land we farm so that they can experience, how their food is grown, just firsthand when they come here. Every growing season, we invite people to shop at our farm stand or participate in community farm events, U-Pick events. And as you mentioned, 12 years ago, we formed a nonprofit on-farm education organization called Farm Discovery. And through that, we are offering farm tours and summer camps and hands-on experiential learning programs for children. Program we've been
Tom, I think we might have just lost your connection. Are we hearing, can you hear me? No. Okay, I'm thinking that we might have lost Tom. Anyone that wants to help me out in that department is, there you are.
We opened up a potato patch for the fathers and the kids to dig for potatoes. And it was really exciting. And there was a little boy that came up to me and said, "Hey, Farmer Tom, could you pay me to help you dig up these potatoes?" That's how excited he was. And it's those experiences, I think, that are, that inspire me, and also I think point towards how important it is for farms to be a resource to the community. We are blessed to live on the Central Coast. It is one of the richest and most fertile agriculture regions in the country. But however, most of the food is grown by very large farms, driven by an economy of scale and profit-oriented industrial farming methods, producing food to be consumed far beyond our region. I think it is important that a resilient food system has a healthy diversity of many different type of farming operations, scale, and different farming practices, so that we can have access to a large diversity of commodities that are supplied through a nimble supply chain, and ensure that all members in our community have access to healthy and affordable food. I find it encouraging that we as consumers, can all have an impact on a more resilient food system, or food ecosystem. And I remember Wendell Berry, and when I read one of his books, saying, eating is an agricultural act, and we all are consumers of food, and it places the responsibility and choice of what kind of food system we want squarely onto our plates. And the relationship we have with food is important, and it nourishes, ourselves and health of our families. It impacts how we engage with each other as a community, and ultimately, I think it will impact how agriculture here and across the country will remain productive. So in closing, I just encourage businesses and individuals to seek out ways to engage more directly with farmers and ranchers, with bakers, butchers, fishermen, chefs, by buying and consuming food directly from them. And if possible, whether it's a business, purchase through wholesale distributors who source and promote local producers. And at an individual level, maybe try to purchase directly from producers through a CSA program like ours, or farmers markets. There's many delivery services, and also, local restaurants and retail stores who source within our local food shed. So this is really all I have to say, and thank you again for this opportunity. And I welcome any questions if there is time. And once this is all over, I invite you all to come to the farm and maybe help me dig up some potatoes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. I'll take you up on that offer as soon as we can get out there. I just wanted to say that, again, when we set up this conference, we thought that it would be really interesting to talk about our food ecosystem and the local way that we bring food and the whole system around, just beyond just agriculture. And the fact that this COVID-19 crisis has happened has just brought this issue so much more to the forefront that it was almost like we were prescient in having you speak here today. There's so much about local food resiliency. We're reading in the paper every day about food being dumped and animals having to be euthanized because they just don't have any place to go because of these huge growing and farm factories. So I think it's just so important, Tom's message about supporting our local people, our local farmers. There's so many wonderful farmers to support, including this guy. And I think the question that I wanted to ask you before we move on is, are there enough farmers right now, and do you see the younger generation interested to engage and become farmers like you?
There's definitely an issue that we have kind of distanced ourselves from, our food source, and our, and more people have moved into urban areas, and but there is a resurgence of young people, kind of the age 30 to, between the age of 30 to 40, of starting up small farms, especially around urban centers, and I think that's a promising development, and we can only, through farm organizations like Farm Bureau and other organizations, really promote young farmers and ranchers, to be able to have access to land, to have the opportunity to really see a future in it. And I think we a lot of times don't maybe provide maybe we don't have a way to really instill on young people how much opportunity there is to engage in agriculture, not just farming, but in many other ways. whether it's through technology that is really driving a lot of, for example, what we're doing, we would not be able to service 600, CSA members or plus, if we wouldn't have sophisticated online platforms to, to interact with them. And so also, there's in the field technologies now that help us conserve water and be much more efficient in the way we grow our crops. And so I think there's opportunities for young people to engage, and not just think that, it's a job where you get your hands dirty and that's all it is, and it's really hard, and we can't really make a living from that. So I'm hopeful that there's more, through more engagement with the consumers, maybe a better message to encourage younger people to join in and become farmers of the future.
Great. Well, on that optimistic note, we'll set you free, and thank you again for your time and participating in all the wonderful things you do to make our community stronger and feeding all of us. And I wish you continued good health and safety during these times.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, moving right along. I'm going to introduce now our next speaker, Karen Kopic, who runs Covia Home Match, an innovative home sharing program that is coming to our region. She has over 15 years experience in developing strategies, partnerships, and teams to expedite the sustainable growth of mission-oriented organizations. And we're excited to learn more about Home Match today. Again, in the context of the fact that we asked Karen to join our event before the crisis, I think this is a really relevant topic, and I'm so grateful for you to be able to share what you're doing with our audience today. So over to you, Karen.
Great, thank you so much. Let me bring up my slides. So in times of crisis, communities really pull together. And we're in a crisis right now, as Kate had mentioned. Home sharing is a very quick, cost-effective, and community-oriented way of dealing with one part of the crisis, which is affordable housing. I like to start these discussions with a perspective from one of our participants. And so today we have Doris's story. So I'd like to tell Doris's story in her own voice for a few moments.
When I lost my husband 6 years ago, I had no idea how I was going to be able to stay in the marina home that I loved. His year-long battle with lung cancer had wiped out our 401k and all of our savings. I had put my own business on hold so that I could be by his side. So all that I was left with was a mountain of debt and Social Security. I am still trying to dig my way out of. If it wasn't for home sharing, I would have lost my home. I know that sharing a home can be really scary, especially in these uncertain times. But I am so grateful to be working with Covia Home Match as their first test case in Monterey County. Having a background check done and a living together agreement gave me the peace of mind that I needed. I am also glad to have someone living here, especially in these uncertain times. And my housemate has been so helpful in doing all the grocery shopping and planting a food garden. We also enjoy sitting together and watching comedy movies to take the stress off. And it's great to have someone to laugh with and talk to.
So unfortunately, Doris's story is all too common. 9 in 10 older adults in the 3 counties that MBEP serves, in all 3 counties, a significant portion of older adults struggle to meet their basic needs. There was a call the other day with the California Department of Aging and Adult Services in San Francisco. They said that 90% of the calls that they receive are from older adults saying they frankly don't have enough money to buy food. And so they're going to bed hungry at nights. A significant number of older adults also have at least one disability, and several live alone, as a large portion live alone. So that means aging in place where people want to be is actually really challenging to do without a little bit of help from others. And speaking of social isolation, when we used to give this talk, people didn't really understand how important isolation could be or what an impact it could have on you. I think we're all very familiar now with just the multiple dimensions of isolation. But did you realize or did you know that the physical impact of being loneliness is equivalent on your physical health and longevity than it is smoking 15 cigarettes a day? So we're literally killing ourselves in this loneliness epidemic. And older adults, unfortunately, bear the brunt of this because many do live alone or have lost friends and family that are near and dear to them. Let's say that you're a renter, you don't own a home. If you lived in Hollister and earned the minimum wage, 70% or more of your salary would go to just paying the rent. And if you lived in Santa Cruz or in Monterey County, that would be even higher. Let's say you're an older adult living on Social Security. 120% of your Social Security benefit, your typical Social Security benefit, would go to paying the rent in Hollister. And again, if you lived in Santa Cruz or on the Monterey Peninsula, that would be even higher. That means that other basics, food, and transportation, healthcare, heaven forbid you want to go out and have fun, or maybe stay home and have fun these days, all of that's out of the question. But really the biggest issue is you're one paycheck, lost paycheck away from really a disaster or even homelessness. And this isn't a trivial, this is a real threat. In Supervisor Parker, she has a Hot Topics call. A few weeks ago, she mentioned that she had more than 100 homeless families already in her county or in her district, just due to the shutdown and people not being able to receive steady paychecks. So this is a really enormous threat for our community. And unfortunately, we just heard Christopher speak about, is it a U shape or a V shape depression or recession? It doesn't really matter. There's generally a lag between when there is an economic downturn and the peak of homelessness. And so right now is the time to really start planning for and creating affordable houses for people. Building, it's fabulous that the construction is going to continue. It may slow a little bit, but that's where home sharing can play a really vital role. It leverages existing infrastructure to immediately provide affordable homes for people without any need for construction, service permits, zones. Everything is all ready and available right now. So there is good news on the horizon. Trulia did a really cool study and found or estimated that there are more than 350,000 vacant rooms in the top 6 housing markets in California alone. So if just a small portion of those rooms were filled with or rented at affordable rates, we could make a significant impact on the affordable housing crisis. And again, this can be done with no need for construction, so it's immediate, no need for special permits, no water permits, and no zoning changes. So let me tell you about how our program works. We're a nonprofit, and there's about 50 nonprofits that offer home sharing programs all across the United States, and we're all pretty similar. We're a very personalized, high-touch service. We do comprehensive screenings, everything from a criminal background check, income verification, we verify people's identity, ask for references, and we have a very long application. We often say we don't charge them money, we charge them paperwork. So we really want to get to know our participants so we can match them together. Because as we say here on the slide, we really think the magic is in making a really compatible match. And that brings us to the compatibility is, think of this like kind of like a dating service, but for roommates, not for romance. And let me tell you, we're asked a little bit of both, but it's just for roommates. We spend a lot of time working with the pair, the people that will move in together, staff, we sit down and go over an extensive living together agreement. This is all your normal terms and conditions that you need in order to have a legally sound agreement. But more importantly, there's 10 pages where we get into the nitty gritty of what the house rules are going to be. And we found that setting expectations up front is super key in order to have a successful match ongoing. But once people move in, we don't just check a box and say, yay, we're done, people have moved in. We provide ongoing support. We've checked in with every single match that we have. We have more than 200 people, 200 homes that are filled in the Bay Area. We checked in with each person when the COVID-19 crisis happened to make sure everybody's okay. Do they need anything, connection to resources they may need? We're also available if there's ever an issue in the match. We're always a resource for people. We have flexible timelines. Students really love us. We can do, somebody had a 3-month internship and just needed short-term housing. One woman was going to sell her house in 6 months and move to Arizona to be closer to her children. So we helped her for 6 months. Another, we have a woman she's a master tenant in an apartment. Her son went to college, so she has a spare room. She wanted what she called a forever friend. She didn't want to have to deal, she doesn't like change, didn't want to have people, to have to interview people, find people. She just wanted someone to move in and be set. And so we found the perfect person for her. So the flexibility is really key. And then lastly, we have no service fees. You don't need technology, even in these technology days. We're very hands-on. We'll do things on the phone. I'm driving to a man's house tomorrow to physically distancing, pick up his paperwork from his porch. So we really go the extra mile. And we operate in multiple languages, English, Spanish, and Chinese in the Bay Area. We are super proud of the diversity we have in our program among so many different dimensions. The program at its essence is an affordable housing program. There is an income ceiling for people that are seeking housing in our program that it can't exceed a certain amount of the area median income. More importantly, very few people actually get anywhere near that level. 80% of our participants are extremely low to low income. And the average income for both the providers, people with the homes and the rooms to share, as well as people seeking, is $36,000. We did a survey, impact survey, and 73% of people in our program feel less worried about money, and 60% save $600 or more a month. Well, that's an immense amount of money when you're talking about a salary of $36,000 or less a year, which means you can invest in yourself, your family, and your future. So you can make a difference in the affordable housing crisis. You can advocate for and support funding for home sharing programs. Right now, we're hoping to launch our home sharing program, Home Match, in Monterey County. We'd love your support. You can open your home. We have a city council member in Monterey who's opened his home, and we would love you to open yours as well to help people that are really struggling right now with finding affordable housing. And tell your staff, I have a hard time in the Bay Area, a nonprofit, recruiting and retaining staff. I'm sure many of you face the same issues. So this could be a resource for you. So here's our information on where our locations are, contact, and I look forward to all of your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Excellent. Very exciting that this is progressing and coming to our region this summer. And it really is about funding. I know you did a fabulous presentation to the Board of Supervisors recently to seek funding. Of course, everything is sort of, I bet, up in the air now with the COVID situation. But are there any other ways that we can support you as a community to help bring you to our region, either faster or to keep the timeline that you had originally forecasted?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you say, funding is key. So anybody have contacts at foundations or individuals, anyone who may want to contribute, that would be wonderful. But I think also one thing we have done is we have 31 people who said that they're interested in opening their homes right now for people. So I feel like the more people that are interested in opening their homes, and also the people that have rooms in their homes that want to be available, that really shows the impact that we can have immediately upon launch. So I feel like that's extremely powerful. And also when you're talking about affordable housing, people often think about build or refurbish. Let's add sharing into the mix.
I love that. Somebody's asking, what is the cost for a tenant? Sorry if I missed it. Can you just go give a quick overview if somebody's looking for this, what the typical rent is?
Yeah, so in the Bay Area, and I think it would be different, and every county is very different. In the Bay Area, our typical rent is around $780. You can compare that with a low of like $2,500 in the East Bay to $3,000 or $3,500 in San Francisco. So it's a significant savings.
Yeah. And of course, they're wanting it in Santa Cruz County. So I know that's going to be kind of a slow roll. You're going to start out in Monterey and then move north. Is that correct?
Yeah, so our idea was to start on the Monterey Peninsula. We have a community, a life plan community, retirement community in Pacific Grove. And then from there, we would expand. We have been challenged to think beyond county borders and think about geographic, just in terms of Watsonville isn't super far from Salinas. So maybe there's a way that we can look at the counties and see if we can expand a little faster than expected. So we have heard some interest as well from the county.
Yeah, and let's not leave out San Benito County too, our folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, real quick, and then I know we need to go to break. Let's see. This is interesting. Either if the match is unsuccessful for whatever reason, or unfortunately, since you're dealing with older folks in their homes if there would be a death of a homeowner? How do you assist in those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do provide ongoing support. Part of that is mediation. So if a match does have issues, we will be that neutral party that will come out and help walk through things. We have even further resources if the conflict is a little bigger than we can do. If in the case of a demise, either health-wise or death of one of the owners, we do our best to try to place the person somewhere new. We have taken steps occasionally to put someone in a hotel for a month just so they have a little bit extra runway as well.
Right. So you've had experience in dealing with probably all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Good. Well, yes, the slides will be available. That's another question that came in. The last question, which I think I'd really like to know the answer to, buyers who have purchased through affordable housing programs are generally restricted from renting. Does your organization have a workaround for these restrictions?
So sometimes you can get at least a 1-year ability to rent out a room if you can show financial hardship. We do work with HUD housing counseling organizations that can help with all of the paperwork. We generally have a relationship with the county as well to help facilitate that. So we have absolutely worked in that scenario in the past.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Karen. I think it's a fabulous program you're doing. I'm so glad that we're exploring this option and have this possibility, as you say, to add it to a list of options in our housing crisis here in our region. And we look forward to working with you more closely and continued success in your expansion in our region.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all your support. Bye.
Okay, everyone. This is the 7th inning stretch. We're going to take a little bit of a break. Go get some coffee, some tea, stretch, just be back at your screens. We're gonna keep us on time to come back a little shorter break at 11:35. So we're gonna get Brian Fitzgerald back to play a little bit more tunes, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Hey, Brian, thank you. Cheers to you.
Thank you so much.
I get the Bahamas mode with my photo here, and welcome everybody back from break. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. See you in a little bit.
Okay. Great. Okay. Awesome job. We love having that little musical interlude. And thanks everybody for coming back from break. So before I get to our panel, I wanted to do our final poll, which I thought would be kind of fun. So what are some of the activities that you've been doing more of during sheltering in place? Cooking, baking, gardening, reading, learning how to actually call people. I thought that was a good one. Volunteering. I know a lot of people have been sewing masks. I have a mask that I wear that a friend made me. And learning a new skill and ordering food from local restaurants. So we thought that would be kind of fun to see what you all have been up to as we settle back in for our second part of our event here. A lot of cooking and baking going on there. I'm with you. I've been baking bread like crazy. I don't know what that's all about, but it's very soul feeding, I think. And gardening for sure, reading, and good. Ordering food from local restaurants. Love that. Fun. Okay, good. All righty, we're going to get back into it with the program with our panel discussion, which I'm really excited about. As you may know, MBEP has recently allocated resources towards our newest initiative, climate change. To date, our efforts have primarily focused on the intersection between housing and climate change as it relates to water usage, building housing near transportation, and the like. But we've also been involved in thinking about how we could use our convening power. So next week, we are helping to produce an online Central Coast Climate Summit series that will help communities understand how they can access resources to tools, especially the funding and incentives available for greenhouse gas reduction measures. If you'd like to learn more, please visit MBEP's climate change webpage. CSUMB is also our partner in this event, so there's information through that avenue also. Now I'd like to introduce J.R. Killigrew, who is the Director of Communications and Energy Programs at Monterey Bay Community Power. MBCP is our local community choice aggregator, or CCA, who partners with PG&E to deliver our power. MBCP's current 300,000 customers in our region will expand to over 430,000 customers by 2021, with the inclusion of 11 new jurisdictions across San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. JR has worked at other CCAs and for regional agencies to expand climate mitigation and climate adaptation tools and resources. And we're really stoked to have him here in our region now, and very pleased to welcome him to our virtual stage, kick off the panel, and introduce the other panelists. So over to you, JR.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. It's great to virtually be here with all of you. It sounds like this event has been a smash hit so far, and just want to acknowledge the opportunity for MBCP to help moderate this really crucial and important discussion in light of what is going on related to COVID. We're also really excited to be a part of MBEP. This is a crucial organization that's advancing change in the Monterey Bay region, so certainly encourage folks to learn more about MBEP and become a member if possible. We do want to extend our acknowledgement and appreciation to all the civic leaders, first responders across the region who are addressing this pandemic that's happening. We know there's a lot of amazing work that's going on in the region to help support those in need. You know, it goes without saying that, you know, life as we know it has changed incredibly, but we do feel like there is an opportunity to have a dialogue about the growing importance and relevance of climate change and how do we address climate change and continue to accelerate change in light of this pandemic. It's certainly a unique opportunity to say the least. And, you know, to be humbly speaking, we know the Earth is getting a moment to breathe, but it does come at a significant economic cost with millions out of work and wondering about their next paycheck. So the big question is how do we effectively gauge when we're not together, and how do we bring forward inspiring solutions to help kind of accelerate the type of opportunities that are out there? MBCP, as you folks may know, we are a public agency tasked with reducing greenhouse gas emissions and leveraging clean energy to provide community benefits. But we're also really keenly aware of the complex relationship, but also inspiring relationship between climate change and economics. We recently approved a financial relief package for COVID-19 to reduce our rates to inject about $22 million into the regional economy through lower rates. We're also set up a $25 million fund to support energy resiliency for the public and private sector. And we're also looking at deploying millions of dollars to help electrify both the housing market as well as the transportation industries. We see the kind of convergence of economic vitality and addressing climate change as a win-win solution. And so I was really excited to be a part of this panel because it poses a really interesting question of how do we deal with climate change in light of a pandemic? So we wanted to outline the importance of this great nexus of folks coming from the private, public, and technology sectors who are addressing climate change in light of this pandemic. We all recognize it's happening, but it is invaluable to learn and connect with these panelists who are helping to kind of shape the present and the future of the Monterey Bay region. So without further ado, I want to welcome our panelists. Let's start off with Elise Brentel, who is the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of this amazing company called South Valley Internet. She comes with more than 24 years of experience in helping to advance the tech industry. So it's really great to have you, Elise, here today.
Thank you very much, JR. It's a pleasure to be here.
Secondly, I'd like to welcome Carl Rice, who's the CEO of the Seaside Company. He's been the president of the Seaside Company for some time. Prior to that, he helped work in the real estate industry. He is a long-standing resident of the Santa Cruz area, and it's really great to have his perspective related to the kind of the tourism and hospitality industry today. So welcome, Carl.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Last but certainly not least is the city manager, Rene Mendez from the great city of Gonzales. Welcome, Rene. He brings over 20 years of state and local government experience, and he currently serves as the chair of the MBCP Operations Board that guides day-to-day activities for MBCP. He really brings a breadth of experience about what it means to kind of galvanize the public sector and make sure that resources are being allocated to his constituents. So welcome, everybody. It's good to virtually see you all across the Monterey Bay region. So before we get started, I just wanted to preface that the panel is definitely going to be a conversation today, but we just wanted to outline some kind of areas that we're going to discuss, the relevance, climate change in wake of this global pandemic, move into the risks and opportunities, and then we want to leave everybody with some inspiration going forward of what can happen. So I want to start it off with you, Carl. What are your thoughts on climate change as it relates to the Seaside Company's work, in the midst of this pandemic? Like, are you folks concerned about climate change, and do you feel pressure, the need to act on it as a tourism, as a group that needs people to come to the boardwalk and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. Well, I would say that the Seaside Company, and in particular the boardwalk, given its intimate and very close proximity to the Pacific Ocean, we have a keen awareness of climate change and certainly what it could mean to sea level rise over time. So, we're very aware of climate change. We're active participants throughout the community and trying to figure out what we can do as a company and what we can do as a, participant in the community to be thinking about climate change and finding ways to try to address it, sustainably. In the midst of a pandemic, some of our thinking and efforts around climate change, admittedly, are probably on pause. We can barely plan for what tomorrow is going to bring in terms of our amusement park. So we got to get through that first before we can get back to thinking longer term about climate change. But climate change is a very relevant topic to us here at the Seaside Company.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And now, Elise, your company does some really innovative work. Like, how is climate change baking your way into advancing, access to technology through South Valley Internet?
Well, the climate plays a key role in what we're actually doing. Our entire industry revolves around power, right? Yep. Digitally on, off, on, off. So, the fires over the past few years have had a huge impact on our industry and how we are looking at delivering those services. We don't like seeing millions and millions of dollars of assets which are utilized as lifelines for people going up in flames. So in the example of South Valley Internet, whenever and wherever possible, we are building underground. And in relation to the pandemic, oh my gosh, this has absolutely altered our world. Unlike many other companies, we are an essential business. We provide voice and data. And because of this, we're busier than ever. And it makes it very challenging for us having our teams work from home remotely. We're trying to shelter in place while providing these services and this, the build outs necessary to provide services to those people in need who don't have it yet.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's definitely a complex issue. And then, Rene, as a city leader, the city has a climate action plan. How is the city continuing to think about climate change, especially in light of this pandemic?
Well, I don't think, frankly, we have to approach it like an opportunity. There are some very real impacts going on. And as Kate spoke earlier today, about how the pandemic has really put the spotlight on some of the inequities, some of the challenges that we have, of whether it's broadband, whether there's the discrepancy in resources to our most vulnerable communities and so forth. So I think climate change and the current pause that we're having today gives us the opportunity to really engage with our communities. Legislatively, cities need to pay attention, but for our future, it's imperative that we do. There's a lot of things that we have been doing, and we'll speak to later, that frankly, in a climate change mentality and mindset, will help us deal with future significant interruptions in business, in our way of life. like we're experiencing today in the pandemic. So I can give more examples later, but.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. And that kind of leads us into the next question is like, what are the positive implications that this pandemic response hold for climate action? So from Elise, from your perspective, you've kind of loosely discussed that, but like you've mentioned earlier before, it could be an awakening. So like, how do we kind of see this as an implication in a positive way to kind of move us forward?
Yeah, I've given this question a lot of thought, and the fundamental answer that comes to me is be prepared. We cannot, as a society, depend on society to provide us with everything. We need to be prepared for those outages. The internet is more than just, oh, this is a nice thing to have. It has become a utility, just like power, water, gas, electric. We need this to stay connected, especially during this pandemic. We can't expect to move forward as we have in years past. This past summer is a perfect example of that, where we had those rolling blackouts where the wind popped up and we were down for 2 days. We didn't have power. Well, if you don't have power, you don't have internet. Your providers can have as much backup power and be up and lit and providing services, but if the end users don't have UPSs backing up their modems, their routers, if they don't have generators to provide them with power over 24, 48 hours, then it's useless. We have to change the way we think of our utilities, and we have to be prepared to support those utilities ourselves, especially power.
Yeah, that you bring up power seems to be this kind of underlying thread. And I wanted to kick it over to Renee. Like, how are you and what is the city doing to help kind of advance those kind of innovative solutions? So whether it's a pandemic or a public safety power shutoff, how is the city really advancing some innovative opportunities?
Yeah, so from the city's perspective, in many cities, it was in Monterey Bay Community Power that's been mentioned earlier in the conference, was innovative in that it brought 3 regions together, 3 counties, and now we're expanding, and all these cities in a common vision. So the innovation was not necessarily community choice aggregate, but it was bringing all these diverse interests into a common vision. So I think that's one that really should not be understated. We're looking to develop a microgrid for our industrial park and our business users. Heard a little bit about the wildfires and some of the interruption in energy that have occurred. For us, we in Soledad were 2 cities that lived a power shutoff. We were out for a couple of days and our businesses lost real dollars. We lost economic impact. So I think it's important to be innovative in the energy space. And I just kind of want to also stress, we need to continue to be innovative, connecting with our communities and engaging our communities. Climate change and climate action is not about preaching. It's about making it relevant to our communities. It's by understanding and listening and bringing them on board with us. And we have a decent opportunity right now because a lot of our community is sheltered in place. So we should take advantage of those opportunities to connect.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I wanted to get your thoughts, Carl, about, what kind of economic, social, or environmental impacts has the Seaside Company seen over the years, and kind of what is kind of your vision of the future as you start dealing with all these intricacies?
Yeah, well, for us, our business thrives on getting people, usually en masse, to come spend time with us here on the coast of the Monterey Bay. And so if you think about climate change and what we've seen in recent years, at least as I think of it, locally and in the Greater Bay Area and Central Valley, there's, less rain, there's more drought, there's warmer weather. Frankly, in the short run, those things have benefited us. And, we don't hide that fact. When it's warmer out and it's drier out, people are more inclined to come spend time with us. I would compare and contrast that with, like the ski industry, and there's many interesting comparisons with the amusement park industry and the ski industry. If you look at them, particularly in California, they're on the other side of global warming in recent years. There's no snow. So, in the short run, we've actually seen a benefit, but that's, short-term thinking to think that that's what we want to see, because of course, over the long run, if climate change goes unmanaged, that ocean at some point is going to rise, and more volatile storms and all sorts of other things that are related to that. And that poses a serious threat to the boardwalk and to many other industries.
Sure. Now, in terms of like, I'm sure the audience is probably wondering, like, well, what are some of your organizations doing addressing climate change, whether it could be recycling or doing alternative transportation? So, like, Elise, just from you as an internet provider, you know, what is your organization doing to help reduce emissions or address climate change organizationally that maybe folks may not have already known?
Right. Well, for us, obviously, electricity is the very crux of what we do. And we're constantly looking at how we can reduce the utilization of this. So actually, last year, I'm very proud to say, we reduced our utilization here in our NOC, our network our NOC, by almost 50%, and that was awesome. And we did that by putting in new air conditioning systems. We're constantly replacing old servers with new servers that are much more much more energy efficient. And then we also have gone to solar quite a bit. Whenever and wherever possible, we utilize solar on our wireless network to provide power, not only as a backup, but as a primary source.
Got it. Yeah, that's great to hear. And then Renee, I know the city's doing a ton to advance and help reduce emissions, but what are some of the key efforts that the community may not know that the city is leading in terms of reducing emissions and making sure that you know, the folks in the community are knowing the good work that's happening?
Well, I mean, I think it all started with the vision over 10 years ago. It was a deliberate engagement back in 2005 to working with the council directing and the mayor directing for us to embark on a climate action plan. We were actually one of the first few cities that did that early in Monterey County. So that set the vision. Part of the vision, you're going to hear me say this quite a bit, is in our communities, really connecting and understanding their issues and concerns and giving them an opportunity to voice their aspirations and what they want to see in their future. That is so integral in climate change. And I think sometimes we get real abstract about it, and we tend to preach as opposed to making it part of what we do. So that's one thing. We've solarized all our facilities. Taylor, some of our private sector partners have been amazing in really reducing the carbon footprint by using solar, wind. We, for example, own 2 wind turbines. The city does that. The city's not making any money off those turbines. They're really as a business incentive. So some of our companies have been able to deploy them and use them. I talked about the microgrid. We're in the plans of finalizing a microgrid to power an industrial park that's going to create not only clean energy, but lead to more jobs and more good paying jobs, right? Sustainable wages. And finally, the council, we've been working on this for about 10 years as well, this Internet for All idea. In the city of Gonzales, the council last year approved a partnership with T-Mobile to deploy 2,000 free hotspots to our community. The pandemic kind of shifted that a bit, but we got them out there. And so right now in our community, every household has the opportunity to have a free hotspot. And we have about 1,400 deployed in our community.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic. Yeah, it shows you the wide breadth of what the city's doing, as well as what you've been outlining, Elise. Over to you, Carl. You know, the Beach Boardwalk website does have a list of the kind of eco efforts that the Seaside Company is initiating, but you know, let the region know about the great work that the Seaside Company is doing.
Yeah, sure. And, you know, we're proud of the efforts we've put forward thus far, and undoubtedly there's more that still needs to be done. But in terms of what we've done so far, I mean, there's a myriad of things, you know, from a transportation standpoint as it relates to our employees. We're a big employer in the Santa Cruz area. We run employee shuttles from Watsonville so that those folks that live in Watsonville and need to get into Santa Cruz and to the boardwalk don't need to all be sitting in their individual cars. We operate a number of satellite or remote parking lots and provide shuttles for both our employees and our guests, our visitors, in the summertime. Elsewhere, we reclaim all of the rainwater that falls onto the boardwalk, and we capture that and we reuse it throughout our facilities, largely to water the plants and do other things. We're in the process of upgrading our LED technology, not only in our offices, but as it relates to all of our rides. When we buy rides, we're buying more energy efficient rides. So there's a whole host of things that we're doing to try to do our part to address this issue.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And it's good to be able to kind of see the breadth of what's going on across the Monterey Bay region. I think folks that may or may not know that, transportation emissions are the number one source of emissions, not only in the state, but also specifically in this region. MBCP did an electrification strategic plan that sought somewhere around 4 million metric tons of pollutions being put out into the environment every year from buses, vehicles, you name it, all that kind of stuff. So there really is this incredible opportunity to transform and electrify this region. And there are great opportunities, whether it's EV infrastructure, getting into electric vehicles, helping to do fleet electrification. So if there are folks who kind of thinking about that right now, that's definitely a call to action to think through, how can I help accelerate that change within my organization, whether it's just a few vehicles and EV charging. The more infrastructure that we have, the better we can accelerate the change and provide the cleaner air for everyone. I did want to pivot for a second and think through and get your perspectives about kind of organizational management or organizational approaches to climate change. Like, how are each of your organizations positioning the risk and opportunity of climate change within your governance structure, whether it's the city council or the way the Seaside Company operates? How is that being integrated into the way you kind of govern and manage your business now in terms of kind of institutionally baking it in? So Elise, let's start with you.
It's a part of our foundation on our day-to-day activities. So as I mentioned before, energy, power is the very source of our company. And we are constantly looking at more cost-effective, more efficient ways to deploy our equipment and provide services while utilizing lower amounts of power. I mentioned to you that we went solar. I mentioned to you that we put in new AC units here at our NOC. We transitioned over to LED lights. We try to go for more fuel efficient vehicles. I haven't seen an electric vehicle yet that would meet our needs, but I'm hoping that they'll be here soon and we'll be able to utilize those as well. But, again, we're always looking at ways. It's just a piece of the fabric of the business itself.
Great. Now over to you, Renee.
For ours, I spoke a lot about the Climate Action Plan. We adopted a Gonzales Coast Green strategy, again, over 10 years ago, that's really driven a mindset of social equity, economic vitality, and environmental responsibility and stewardship. Those are significantly integrated. So we've adopted our policies. It's something that's embedded in everything we do in the city. That led to a health and all policies effort where we adopted a health element. Well, if you take care of the environment, it improves your health. So the connections are there. There's no reason to, think of these as one individual isolated policy. So we've done a lot of that. That's led to a lot of the stuff that I talked about in the past. It's also led, and I'm going to end it with, more of a robust engagement with our community. We have what I believe is a youth engagement initiative and program that's second to none in the country. We truly, truly engage with our youth. We truly, truly engage with our school districts. So they're our future, right? We always say our kids are our future. Well, we have to bring them in. We have to work with them. We have to get them involved. So those are just some of the things that we've been doing over the last decade.
Yeah. And then finally, Carl, how is, the way the Seaside operates from a governance structure integrating climate change into their decision making?
Yeah, well, we try as best we can to integrate climate change and sustainability into our workplace culture or our corporate culture, if you will, and that takes a number of shapes and forms. But we champion and really encourage and try to promote folks that are coming up with innovation and new ideas for us to operate more cleanly, more efficiently. From an ownership standpoint, we're very willing and have already spent quite a bit of money, whether it's donating to the community, to nonprofits, and then in our own facilities and operations, devoting resources financially to improve our sustainability. And, for us, as I've said earlier, our long-term success ultimately is dependent upon, getting a handle on climate change and limiting and hopefully preventing sea level rise. And I think a lot of our folks understand that importance that work for us as we're, hiring largely, thousands of local kids, primarily kids every summer. Through our orientation programs, we try to instill that sense of purpose and importance in them as well. So it's an ongoing process for us.
Yeah, and I think both you and Renee bring up incredible points about galvanizing the youth and making sure they become the stewards that kind of understand the complexity of climate change and pandemics, all that stuff, but kind of inspiring them and using their energy and passion to kind of move the region forward. So I know we're getting close up to opening up an opportunity for the public to ask questions, but I did want to ask each of you, from moving forward from an inspirational perspective, what kind of opportunities are you particularly excited about or looking forward to, even in the midst of this unsettling time, not just for the organization, but for our kind of region as a whole? So Elise, from your perspective, like, what are you excited to see come to fruition in the not so distant future?
Well, our industry is very unique, the telecom industry. And what I can tell you is that moving forward over the next 2 years, we're going to see some huge changes moving forward, specifically in infrastructure. They call this era the gold rush of the telecom industry. You should look forward to seeing some tremendous amount of building of infrastructure to provide our society with much, much faster, much more reliable connectivity. With the internet becoming a utility, we need this. And I just want to say it's coming. As far as the pandemic and right now, if you need help, reach out to your local ISP. They will help you. South Valley Internet has taken a pledge to keep people connected and to help as best we can with those that cannot afford to be connected. If you need help, reach out.
Great to hear. Renee, what are you excited to see in the future in light of what's going on?
I'm going to start by, I was recently reading an interview from a colleague of mine, Rick Cole, who was a former Santa Monica city manager. And what struck me is what he said is the current pandemic and where we're at today really needs to shift how we think, how we do business in local government. And we were starting from scratch and building local government from now. It would probably look more like an iPhone, not like a rotary phone. And that kind of really struck me that we need to be innovative. We need to take the opportunity that we're doing right now to engage with our folks at home to really bring them forward. We need to take to scale and really continue the innovation with Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, Monterey Bay Community Power, really develop the robust partnerships. We also need to not be afraid to have the conversations, ask the tough questions in a respectful manner, and be able to bring visions together. I think the other panelists have said, we're really all in this together. And I think more than ever, we really need to activate on that. I'm afraid that 2 months after we get done with this whole pandemic, things will go back to the way they were. And we will be no better prepared the next time this happens. So I think it's imperative on all of us to really start the recovery plan now and really to learn from the lessons that we're experiencing today.
Sure. Yeah. And then Carl, what would you like to see come out of this pandemic that, can activate and inspire folks from your perspective?
Yeah, certainly in the short run, we all want to get through this pandemic as quickly, but as safely as possible. And, if there's something to be learned from it, certainly for me personally, it's a reminder of how much I appreciate being around other people, whether it's your friends, your family, your coworkers, whoever it might be. And when that's taken away from you, even though we have virtual technology to try to take its place temporarily, there's no substitute for people working together and coming together. And, whether that's coming together in the boardwalk, I'm tired of being the only one at the boardwalk every day during this, but, it doesn't really matter where or what form. I think, as people, we're better off when we're together, and working together and collaborating together. So I think a lot of businesses from a business standpoint have been forced into a position of understanding and realizing how they might be able to better operate on a sustainable level as a result of the pandemic, which I think is a perhaps a silver lining in what is otherwise a very terrible situation. But, just looking forward, I think there's always hope in looking forward and trying to be positive in terms of, there's a lot of good work left to be done for us to continue to preserve this region that we all know and love. So that's exciting, and I look forward to those opportunities in the future.
Yeah, and it's just to kind of highlight the intersection of Monterey Bay Community Power and all of this is just as Renee was discussing about the innovation, like through his leadership in the operations board and our policy board, we were able to accelerate this relief package for COVID-19 so fast and so quickly. Most folks would probably laugh that like a government agency could move and be that nimble and that innovative in basically a couple weeks. So I think that kind of just highlights the real value of a community choice aggregator being that kind of centralized power procurement entity for the region to not only be responsive and nimble to the community, but also really accelerate the needs for programs from all the different customers. So we're really excited to be kind of at the cutting edge of supporting our residential customers from all walks of life, the businesses, but then most importantly, the ag industry that, is that lifeblood that runs all the way down from Santa Barbara all the way up to Santa Cruz. And not to mention certainly the tourism hospitality industry that kind of makes this region so desirable to frequent. While we kind of keep moving along, are there any kind of lessons you folks have learned that you want to share in terms of best practices of being in a remote, shelter in place endeavor over the last few weeks? We've actually instituted at Monterey Bay like a weekly huddle for 15 minutes where people just get together and like share fun stories about their kids or dogs or just any fun things that we've done. So is there anything else you could help share with people to bring some levity in light of this situation?
I, for one, will say that we have Friday night virtual dinners. So everybody brings their dinner. We have a Zoom meeting, and it's normal friends that we meet up with, and we sit there and toast and talk and catch up, on the phone. Like Carl mentioned, it's not quite the same not being with those people, but, it's a lot better than sitting at home by yourself or with your loved ones. I mean, we all love them, but there's togetherness and then there's togetherness. So it's nice to reach out to, the friends that we've chosen to have as a part of our life and catch up with them and see them.
Great.
And some of the creativity, right? Some of the creativity that's going on right now with the connections, think about using that same kind of energy post-pandemic.
Yeah.
So if we're using the same kind of energy to create the connections afterwards, and that's the part of the new norm, I'm pretty excited about what that's going to look like in a few months.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I think the last 2 months or so, whatever it's been, feels like an eternity. But over the last 2 months, I've probably connected with more friends, more family, more business colleagues than I did before the pandemic. And before the pandemic, of course, there wasn't really anything preventing me from reaching out and connecting. But the nature of the pandemic, for me at least, has been one that I have actually been more connected in a lot of ways. And I think that's been very fulfilling for me. And again, a positive if we're searching for one out of this pandemic. And maybe lastly, this forum today was supposed to be held in the Coconut Grove, just down the hall from where I'm sitting right now. And I walked through there this morning, and I can tell all of you it's a very lonely place without you there. The only thing I saw in there were 2 pigeons, literally 2 pigeons had found their way into the Coconut Grove. So that's a sign of the times here at the Boardwalk. It's only pigeons that are getting to enjoy our world-class facilities and world-class locations. So I hope to have all of you back in that space and not the silly birds in short order.
Yeah, I mean, while we're moving forward, I mean, are there any kind of like opportunities you could share that whether businesses or governments or individuals could take to align, with their immediate response to advancing sustainability? What are the 3 things they could potentially do to help prepare for what's going on?
So one of them would be, again, I've said it a lot, is engage.
Yeah.
Engage, reach out and ask questions. Truly understand. For governments, really prepare to spend as much time and energy we spend on some of the impacts that we're all experiencing and that it could be perceived as negative. Chris talked about that earlier. Spend as much time and energy on that, also on the positive side, on what we're learning, what we're gonna move forward. The interest environment is gonna be a little different. Maybe there's an opportunity to have some investments. There's an opportunity to connect with your community, to bring them along in some of those job creations and so forth, a little differently than we've done in the past. So, I think it's incumbent upon us to be that, I'm not going to say innovative, but to be that connected, to really maintain the connectivity.
Hey,
Great.
Jim, I'm going to crash your panel here. My phone's blowing up with questions from the audience. I wanted to make sure that we had some time to get to those before we have to close the panel. Renee, I'm going to keep with you because there's a lot of interest in learning more about your microgrid, what it's used for. Could you just kind of maybe give a quick overview, maybe just start with the basics, what a microgrid is and why it's important, and then why you decided to do it and what is it used for?
So a microgrid, for us, the way we're defining it is trying to create a robust, reliable, sustainable energy system for an industrial park. Monterey Community Power is provided a really good, solid sort of local foundation to anchor our region and to really make local decisions here for our region, which is, I think it's really good. And so under the microgrid, it will be under that to try to establish an energy source for our industrial park, which is going to have solar, wind. It's going to have the backups, other redundancies. And it's really to provide a sustainable, low-cost, competitive price energy system for our businesses, which is going to help promote economic development, going to create jobs that ultimately lead to a quality of life increase for our community. So that is sort of in a nutshell, it's what we're working to do right now. And we're partnered with Concentric Power here locally to do the project with us.
Great. Yeah. No, I've heard such good things about that company. So that's great that they're in our region. So it's, to be clear, it's just for the industrial park at this point. And then is there plans to expand the use of that microgrid to other parts of operations of the city?
There is. There's right now we're starting with we're looking at the industrial park is the way we can activate, kind of like low-hanging fruit, if you will. But there are plans to expand. We've already started talking with our developers on the housing side to expand it to the new development, right? Whether through solar or other technologies. So all those conversations are underway. And I think the key is to connect everything together, right? And to make sure that the connections are being made at the policy level and at the staff level to make sure that the opportunities are taken advantage of. So yes, we are discussing the expansion once we get it up and running.
Yeah. So I was listening to NPR yesterday and they were talking about this moment in time being a kind of like an opportunity, if you will, to kill two birds with one stone, to not only improve our response in regards to climate change, but also at the same time deal with some of the issues that are coming out of the pandemic. So I guess, to the panel, what are the one or two steps that we should be taking now to align our pandemic response with the imperatives of sustainability? And maybe that's more of a question for you, JR, than the other panelists.
Yeah, so I would say from the perspective of, sometimes during an event like this, it gives you a time to kind of sit back and reflect. But I think the most important thing is to be able to assess, monitor and track, and then implement measures. Like if you're not evaluating what you're doing, your impact, whether it's a business or a city, or even an individual, a resident, it's really hard to kind of understand what are the opportunities there for you to be able to accelerate climate change. Like for the sake of a city who has a climate action plan, they've got to look at where their emissions are coming from and then look at attacking, what are the low-hanging fruit, and then develop a plan that can institute a variety of different solutions that can get you there. And that can be kind of replicated in the business community, be replicated in individuals. So the idea of kind of looking towards regionally understanding our emissions profile, regionally understanding how to address climate change is something that I think we're really excited about as we start leveraging partnerships with air districts, with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, with green power, stuff like that. And I think also looking at the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, there are a lot of great regional agencies that are evaluating opportunities to deploy resources around the region. So that's really where we are exciting about, is just partnerships and leveraging and sharing resources through the lens of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in an economically viable way.
Great.
And if I can add to that real quickly, Kate, all those examples and all those agencies that JR mentioned, they're prepared to work with cities. They're prepared to work with businesses. We've done this in Gonzales, all for the most part, using our own resources and our own staff and people. There's a lot of folks out there that will help you do this. So it's not about the expense a lot of times. It's about starting and leveraging the partnerships that already exist. And I think that's sort of the point from a city's perspective that JR really highlighted. We got a lot of help. We just have to be willing to engage, interact, and engage and ask for that help.
Great, thank you. Somebody's asking a specific question, JR, about your discount. Is it a deferred payment, so people will have to pay over time, or is it, or what? Is it a deferment or is it a discount?
Yeah, I mean, technically the language uses a deferment. So we reduce our rates by 50% for 2 months. And then we're figuring out, we have figured out a variety of different ways to basically bring back, not all of that, but a portion of that $22 million. But no matter what, in 2020, folks are actually going to be saving more money on their energy bills than if we didn't do anything, or if PG&E still was that incumbent investor-owned utility.
Right. Okay, and just real quick, because I'm actually dying to know the answer to this question. Carl, can you give us an update on the La Bahia construction?
I am happy to. I suppose that has something to do with today's topic. Well, the La Bahia project, for those of you that don't know, and my sense is probably most of you do, but that's a hotel project that's not yet constructed, but it's been in the works for 35 plus years, at least as it relates to the Seaside Company's efforts. We are what I would describe as were very close up until this pandemic. We had just started demolition of the building right as the shelter-in-place orders came into effect. So it is possible a lot of you who have been following the shelter-in-place orders haven't been by Beach Street here in Santa Cruz lately. Most of that structure is not there anymore. So we were preparing to complete demolition and actually start construction on that hotel. The goal was sometime in the late spring this year. And I would suspect strongly that as a result of the pandemic, that will be deferred for some period of time. I think, ultimately it's unknown how long of a delay there is, but the Seaside Company remains committed to seeing a quality hotel built at that site here in Santa Cruz to augment the existing hospitality industry here.
Great. Yeah, it's a much needed project, and Godspeed with that. We'll see where we all end up with the pandemic. Well, good. Well, we are at time. I just wanted to say thank you all. JR did an excellent job moderating, and thanks so much to our panelists for making the time and all that you do for our communities as leaders in your respective areas. Very excited for, and I hope our audience got a lot out of it and is inspired to take some action going forward. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're going to move ahead to the last part of our program. And for that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Eduardo Ochoa, who's president of CSU Monterey Bay and NBEP's board chair, to announce this year's Public-Private Partnership Award. Eduardo, over to you.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everyone. It's been a great virtual summit so far. And now we are going to be presenting some awards. I'm speaking to you from home, but behind me, you can see the Tanimura and Antwerp Library on the campus of CSUMB, which is the heart of our campus and the place our students, faculty, and staff are impatient to come back to. So to start, I'd like to ask Amy Mitchell-Missa to accept this award on behalf of our public sector health workers who have worked tirelessly to locate ventilators, expand homeless facilities and services, orchestrate expansion of testing and alternate care surge capacity facilities, and so much more. Amy is the supervising public health nurse for the Communicable Disease Unit, Public Health Division at the Santa Cruz County Health Services Agency. Heather was nominated by Dr. Gail Newell, the county's health officer, and Amy is in the frontline contact for all new confirmed COVID-19 cases, overseeing all of the case investigation and contact tracing. In the county's Department Operations Center that was activated for the emergency response to the COVID-19 pandemic, she is the Disease Control Branch Director. She and her team have been invaluable to the containment of the disease, and we are pleased to present you with this award. Amy.
Hi, thank you. Please allow me to express appreciation to the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership for recognizing all of the dedicated members of the Santa Cruz County Public Health Division, and by extension, the many public health professionals across the region who work tirelessly to uphold our part of the healthcare safety net. At Santa Cruz County Public Health, our mission statement is to collaborate with the community to protect, promote, and improve the health and well-being of all. The challenge we face at this time in our region and across the nation has brought renewed meaning to these words as we and our community partners come together in unprecedented ways toward a common goal. The task at hand to save as many lives as possible in partnership with our colleagues across sectors is enormous. Yet we feel a deep conviction that our role is as crucial to saving lives as that of the more visible heroic nurses, doctors, and first responders on the front lines. Terms such as contact tracing and epidemiologic modeling have become part of the national conversation, and these concepts represent principles that we in public health apply to our work on a daily basis, beginning long before the pandemic. I can't help but notice how the public health mission reflects that of MBEP. I say this because our work too, in our work, success is measured by a robust, healthy community where quality of life is possible precisely because of the ongoing behind-the-scenes commitment of so many unsung heroes. Thank you all again for recognizing the contributions of our dedicated public health professionals.
Well, congratulations, Amy, and thank you for all the work that you and your team are doing. Next, I want to recognize Rediat Tadesse to accept this award on behalf of the San Benito Health Foundation, a not-for-profit integrated health facility and a key part of our region's safety net that coordinates comprehensive care for all patients regardless of their ability to pay. Rediat is a family nurse practitioner and has been at the forefront of the response to COVID-19. He has continued to provide care with a smile in spite of the unpredictable circumstances, including working on Sundays to ensure our farm worker community was served with no loss of valuable work hours. Dr. Rosa Vivian Fernandez, CEO of the San Benito Health Foundation, called Rediat a hero and a wonderful member of the San Benito Health Foundation family. We feel the same way. Unfortunately, Rediat was unable to join us today. Is that true?
No, I'm here.
You're here. Yeah. So my notes are mistaken. Well, we are very happy to have you here then. Looks like my script wasn't changed on time. Oh, well, we'll just improvise. Rediat, it's wonderful to have you with us and to accept this award on behalf of all your colleagues for the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I could go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Rediat been working with this organization, San Benito Health Foundation, for about 6 months now. Just my background, I was born and raised in Ethiopia, that's in East Africa. In case you hear my accent, that's where it's from. Well, just to tell you about our clinic, is that is one of the 1,400 federally funded community health care center in America. And, you know, as you know, healthcare, the community healthcare centers in the US provide about 29 million for 9 million patients, especially for the low income and uninsured people every year. And in this crisis, or in this COVID-19 pandemic, and community health centers have been playing a critical role in the national response to the pandemic. And now our clinic switched bulk of the primary care through telemedicine, and we have not stopped seeing patients in clinics. We still take appointments, and we still we are still vaccinating babies, and we see sick patients that cannot be seen only by telemedicine. And I want to share today, I want to focus on what I have been experiencing, you know, through this pandemic. And I have encountered with a high volume of patients with fear, anxiety, and difficulty sleeping, and concentration, and worsening of mental health conditions. And as you know, the demand for mental health services is stronger than ever. And I have been doing research that 6 in 10 Americans once or seek mental health services, either for themselves or the loved ones. So this is very important and critical to that I want to point out to you guys. So despite this strong demand, there are, you know, several barriers to mental health services and care. And as a result, you know, the number of patients in our community come to this clinic to get services in time of this crisis. So for the challenge for the provider, as a provider, the challenge is like, okay, I could prescribe antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, but most of them need urgent or immediate care. And as you know, maybe antidepressant medication takes 3-4 weeks or longer to take effect. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I have to add more medications or change to a new medication. So this is a challenge. So what I have realized is that importance of practicing compassion and unity and collaboration, and knowing, giving time, and being patient with the patients to listen their concerns, and to answer their questions, and make them feel that I am there to take care of them, and make them feel, you know, that I listen to their concern, I feel their concern, their pain, and what they are going through. This has significant impact on their mental health and well-being. And as you know, most of the patients that we are taking care of in this clinic are vulnerable, elderly, and population, low-income populations, and they have nowhere to go, and they're confined to their homes, and some of them, they don't have relatives, some of them they don't people to call and to connect. So this clinic is the only place they could rely on, and they could get services. So this practitioner compassion has helped me to give a quality care and to make sure that our patients are safe. So one thing, another thing, importantly, one thing I realized is that compassion for patients, not only helping the patients, but also helping me, to reduce, stress and manage my own emotions and my own mental health and well-being and anxiety and all that. So I just want to share with you guys that. And for the providers, this is very important, because we, as a provider, I have to be stable mentally, physically, and spiritually to provide a quality care and to provide care, especially this crisis. So so what I realized is that we need to come as united. We need to support each other. And my advice for the whoever listening
Lydia, I'm going to stop you there. I'm so sorry, but we are on time, and we had only allocated a couple minutes. We so appreciate you, and thank you for all you're doing. We are very moved by your comments and your help with all of our community, but we're going to have to move on to our next recipient and then wrap up our program. We're running a little bit late. Thank you. And Eduardo, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Kate, and thank you very much.
I see that Eduardo is on mute, so I am going to.
Sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
I think I unmuted myself, and then someone else tried to unmute me and ended up remuting. Anyway, lastly, I'd like to ask Heather Bowers to accept this award on behalf of the Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula, part of Montage Health. CHOMP has had the most COVID-19 patients than any other hospital in the region. Heather was selected by Dr. Steve Packer, CEO of CHOMP, as their honoree because she has been on the front line working with staff to educate, develop PPE guidelines, and provide insight and information to our team as the pandemic has evolved. Thank you, Heather, for your tireless work in response to this pandemic. Heather? Is Heather here?
Well, part of the joys of doing a live virtual conference, Eduardo, I think we're just going to have to move on without Heather. I'm not seeing her video either. I know she's been in our green room waiting patiently, but she's not. Looks like she's joining us. As Eduardo said, we're just so thrilled to honor all these healthcare workers. Let's see if maybe she comes up while we're doing our little dance. No.
Okay, well, in that case, I did have one more thing I wanted to say before we wrap up. Kate, I just want to thank all of the awardees and congratulations, and say that it is a privilege for me to lead CSUMB as its president for 8 years now, to serve this amazing and supportive community, and to be on the board of MBEP and currently its chair, to support the great work that it does in promoting responsible economic development, which is a mission that dovetails with CSUMB's educational mission and that allows the residents of Monterey to thrive through the great work of you and your staff and to the support they provide. Kate, back to you.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. We're so appreciative of you as our board chair and the leadership that you provided for MBEP and for CSUMB. So thank you so much for all you do. And I just wanted to say that during these extraordinary times, MBEP's entire board of directors felt that it was important to recognize these healthcare individuals. There's so many different individuals and groups of workers that have stepped up and are doing amazing work during this time. Our farm worker community putting food on our table, our first responders, our restaurant people and grocery clerks. The board just felt that calling out specifically healthcare workers that represent the breadth of the region's geography from each sector was important to focus on these healthcare heroes, putting themselves at risk during the crisis and going above and beyond to serve our communities across the region. So deep gratitude to all three of our award recipients and to their many, many team members. The sacrifices that you and your colleagues have made are, to the rest of us, hard to comprehend. We can't thank you enough. When the world eventually does declare this pandemic over, we will have all of you to thank for it. So thank you all to our healthcare workers, and please listen to their guidance regarding staying in place, face masks, etc. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and we've all been doing a really great job. So let's keep listening to the experts and doing what they advise. I'm no doctor, but I've seen epidemiological models that suggest the best strategy for keeping the spread of the infection under control is to drive the number of infections as low as possible before restoring economic activity. That would then let us have time to react if there does incur another flare. And it's really just basic common sense. So the sacrifice is worth it. Our loved ones are depending on all of us to do that. So closing, thank you to all of our amazing speakers. Thanks to Maya and the entire MBEP team, and to Jennifer and her team at PSAV for all your hard work to pivot from a live event to bring this to you virtually. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We are grateful for the privilege of your time. Stay well, be safe. Kate out.